All right, welcome back to another episode of the School of Weird. Today we've got an amazing guest who's joining us internationally. It's morning where I am, night where he is, but that's because he's in the future. And of course, that is John Sanei. How are you, John?
I'm fantastic. Thank you. Wonderful to see you again, Frankie.
That's what I love
Always
about
a
you.
pleasure.
It's one thing to be a futurist, but you make sure that you're always in the future as it relates to where I'm standing, because you usually are on the other side of the world in the future, at maybe not way in the future, but at least some hours.
A few
So
hours, a few hours. I'm not going to get that right all the time, but yes,
yeah,
sometimes I'm ahead of many people in the world. So
that's
yes,
it. And that's what it's
that's
all
a cool
about.
way
Well,
to look at it.
yeah,
Mm.
John, listen, it's funny. I thought about you with the whole love your weird. And as you know, I believe that loving your weird is the key to out innovating the future. And that essentially loving your weird is our superpower in the machine era. So for you, you're doing a lot of amazing work right now. You're helping translate this new world that's changing at a breakneck speed. Tell me a little bit about how you came to this, right? I'm sure you weren't always in futurist. How did you get to futurist? How did you become a futurist? Is that some sort of
Mm.
like,
Yeah,
license
it's
you
a great.
got?
No, I think that's why I call myself a future strategist. Is that I think all of us are futurists in one way or another. For me, it
Hmm.
was a very inherent skill set. I wrote about it in one of my books that, your biggest job in life is to find your genius and share it. You call it find your
Beautiful.
weird. I call it find your genius and share it.
That's
And
it.
for me, being a futurist has been something that's been innate to me from a very, very young age. And from a very young age, I could spot trends and I would spot brands. And in fact, my friends would sometimes tease me and say, "Oh, John, oh, yeah, John again. What's new this time, John?" Because I was always on like this like idea that there must be something new to discover. And so this has
Oh
always
my
been innate to
God.
me. And
How young are we
yeah,
talking,
yeah.
John? How young are
No,
we
from when
talking
I can
here?
remember. No, I'm thinking
Like five,
5,
six,
6 years
maybe?
old. Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so
Right from
John, I don't
back
know if you
there.
realize this, but
Mm.
like love your weird actually represents the weird 5, 6 year old John.
Yes,
And
yes,
and and I,
absolutely.
I find that a lot of people lose that, as you know, but that
Yes.
is actually the blueprint. So when you were trying to figure out the pioneering, there must be something different. I was an astronaut on my own planet, inventing all kinds of stuff. I tried to invent a lot of time machines, hoverboards,
Wow.
all that stuff.
Wow.
And my
Yeah.
friends did the same thing. It was like, why are you being
Mm.
such a weirdo? That's where the love
Well,
your
look,
weird came from.
Do you know this? In 1967, NASA was trying to hire more geniuses.
Yes, of
You
course
know the
I know it.
study?
Yeah. Oh my
And
God. Yeah.
George
With George
Land,
Land.
and
Yeah.
that's right. So
Hmm.
2% of 98% of 5-year-olds are geniuses,
Yeah.
meaning that 98% of 5-year-olds are weird and wonderful and unique. And then we go to
It's
school, and 2% genius is left at the end of school.
That's
So
right. That's right.
yeah,
I
so
I I
schooling
rarely
actually.
do a talk without
Mm,
mentioning that study, because
yes.
it's so illuminating. I wish there was more of those, to be honest. It's
Mm.
intuitively I knew that was true, but
Yeah.
that's actually my favorite part of my keynote experience is actually in the middle of it. We literally take a break and everybody starts telling their neighbor what they were into at 5. So
Yeah.
a huge part of my work is that the genius, like you say, or the weird, is the inner child that's gotten trapped.
Mm. Yeah. That's right. Well, I suppose genius or weirdness has been beaten out of you, sometimes quite literally and other times figuratively.
Yeah.
And at school, if you were too weird or too genius, they'd ask you to go to the principal's office because you were being rebellious and not fitting into the system.
Oh,
So I
it's
think what's
unbelievable.
happened, yeah. So I think our world that we come from prize the lack of weirdness. And where
Yeah.
we're going is the celebration of weirdness. And the reason for that in my world is the commoditization of intelligence. So
Yes.
algorithmic intelligence is kind of done. And we're now moving into unique, creative, lateral genius. And this is something that needs to now, two things need to happen. One, adults have to unlearn old ways of adding value, and youngsters have to be put into new processes to be able to access this muscle of adaptability.
I love it. Yeah. So one of my big things that I've come to really have as a beating the drum with is this idea that imagination and innovation are not learned; they were unlearned, which obviously
Yes,
is in the same vein. And in order to relearn them, we have to actually unlearn some other stuff.
yes,
And that is
that's exactly it.
do you drop into like this idea of divergent versus convergent thinking a lot in your work,
I
or do
think
you
you know,
frame that differently?
I've only started really looking at this divergent thinking, and I realized I'm actually one. That's why I was so
Absolutely.
terrible at school. Yeah.
Yep.
That's why I was so
Yeah,
terrible
yeah.
at
I
school.
was
I
a
just
C
couldn't get
student
there, you
at
know?
best. Yeah, yeah. C student at best.
Yeah. I hardly
School was
passed.
like a
I mean, I
mini turn
hardly
in.
passed. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
then I don't know about you,
exactly.
but when I did
Exactly.
math, I did it. I always did math backwards. I didn't even know till I was out of college that you can study math. Like I always loved math tests because like, oh, cool, I don't have to
Oh,
study. And I would take
yeah.
longer to get there. I would have a trouble showing my work, but I'm a C
Yeah.
student without understanding any formulas. Because for some reason my
Right.
brain just wanted to just figure it out on my own. And I always did it this like long
Yes.
way, not efficient.
Right.
But I
Right.
don't know. It's my brain's wired weird like that.
Well, not weird. Well, I suppose if you're seeing weird in this context, yes, but unique. That's all it is. Your brain's just unique, dude. It's a unique
Okay.
brain, unlike anybody else's brain.
All right, let me let
But
me let me know if you've
yeah,
heard of this. Okay, check this out. Did you know? So I accidentally stumbled on this whole weird thing because originally it wasn't. I was just doing inner child work. It was a real personal thing. It wasn't until I started
yeah.
plugging the Love Your Weird framework into my companies that they just
Mm,
took off. One of them
yes.
had like 60x growth in 3 years, which is just absolutely
Wow.
unnatural. And
Wow.
so there's some really amazing things that happen there. But originally, it was just like this work that I was doing because I realized I had never completely lost my weird, but I had spent a lot of energy covering it up because I thought I was supposed to.
Right.
And I think that's what happens
Yes.
for a lot of us. Um,
Yes. Well,
it's wild.
I, I, I think that what we have to become skilled at is unlearning.
Yes.
And I don't think anybody can actually tell us, well, not anybody. Most people don't know what unlearning is. How
No.
do you teach people how to unlearn specifically?
How to unlearn? I probably do, but I don't call it that. I
Oh, what
more
do you
call it
call it?
I'm, well, I just call it relearning. So I'm more focused on
Okay.
how do we relearn imagination, and part of that is
Right.
stepping into like this like unabashed radical authenticity. So the things that
Right.
I always focus on is first and foremost this idea of getting honest and being
Yeah.
authentic individually, and then
Yeah.
how that relates
Yeah.
to the collective. And then from there, we then can create a space where imagination can all of a sudden have this like
Yes.
freedom and breeding ground
Right.
for that. And then the
Right.
the final component is this idea that there's some companies. I find that when it comes to innovation, companies get it wrong one of three ways.
Yeah.
One, they don't have an authentic enough space where there's enough trust and
Mm.
like people feel safe to show up as their unique brand of weird.
Mm.
So they're
Mm.
already limited when they get into the door.
Mm.
So let's just say you
Mm.
have a company that has that. That's the first one. Let's say you got that check box checked. The next thing is this idea of imagination is not celebrated at work, or that people aren't
Mm.
even using that as a tool. So
Yeah.
let's just assume you have an authentic culture that's psychologically safe and there's trust and people feel like they can show up however they want to. Great. Then you have this space where imagination is celebrated and welcomed and not like judged.
Yeah.
Okay, then there's this third component where actually a lot of companies get it wrong because companies, I think they're trying to allow freedom for authenticity, allow freedom for imagination, but they're missing what I call the collective ingenuity, which is where
Mm.
everyone's coming together for this greater good, if you will,
Mm.
and
Mm.
creating a community where people aren't taking score. I think a lot of
Mm.
companies are constantly wondering why they can't get to breakthrough innovation, and it's because
Mm.
everybody's taking score. So if you're in a lab or you're an experimental or you're trying to create something novel, the rules of silos and processes and the status quo
Mm.
will not allow for that. And so they're sitting there
Yeah.
wondering, scratching their head, why are we not innovative? It's because there's not
Mm.
enough of a space or a mechanism that can
Mm.
turn the make believe or the
Mm.
imagination into reality. So a lot of the
Fair
work I do
point.
is going through those journeys of
Mm.
relearning what's already in there. It's not so much of
Mm.
but when you say unlearning, I think of it in the sense of like there is stuff I've got to get rid of, right? I've got
Yeah.
to take inventory on like what's in the way.
Yeah.
So I guess that's probably that inventory process at the beginning of
Mm.
identifying what is the blockers
Mm.
keeping me from first and foremost being
Mm.
authentic and then
Mm.
secondly
Mm.
imaginative. Those are the things I think of. What do you think of in unlearning?
I like everything you've said. I just want to take it one step back because I think everything you've said is 100%. But if you just go a little bit deeper, you'll start to figure out that most people want to be authentic, but
Yes.
something's stopping them.
Yes.
something. They don't know what it is. That they
Yes.
themselves don't know what it is. And what it actually is trauma,
Yes.
is
Yes.
unprocessed trauma.
Yes.
And what you're going to realize is that trauma is so deeply entrenched in your psyche, you don't even know that you're triggered. You
That's
think
right.
this is normal. And if you think about what emotional intelligence is how quickly can you recover from a trigger?
Mm-hmm.
And if you are triggered for 1 to 5 days, you're in a bad mood. And if you're triggered for 1 to 2 weeks, you're in a bad temperament. And if you're triggered for longer than 2 weeks, welcome to your new personality. And
Mm.
many people in the
Wow.
world
2 weeks,
are
huh?
triggered, and their lives are like, don't you know somebody that's always angry
Yeah.
and somebody that's always um, distrusting of the
Mm.
boss, of their boyfriend, of their girlfriend? Don't you know somebody that's always sad, somebody that's always anxious, somebody that doesn't stop eating? These people are all traumatized by a trigger that's taken them back to old sets of behaviors and a protective mannerism rather than being adaptable and moving forward.
You know, it's
So,
interesting. Yeah, keep going, actually. But I'm loving this. Keep going.
so what's the problem is that your brain has been wired to look for danger, not adaptability, not authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
It's too
Mm-hmm.
dangerous to be authentic because
Yeah.
you've got experience of it not happening. Now, I've got a video that I show in my talk where it shows you brain synapses that are starting to form. And it's an incredible video because it's obviously a microcosm inside your brain where new thought and a new behavior starts to form. It's quite literally two roots that are starting to wire together.
Oh,
Now,
wait,
let's
wait, wait.
remember
I
that.
think I have seen that. I
Yeah,
think I saw, did you share that
yeah,
before?
yeah, I have shared that before.
I think I
Yes.
saw that. That was
Okay.
wild to watch.
Yes, wild to watch because that's the literal formation of your personality, your thought process, your feelings and your emotions and your actions, right? Now, let's remember that neuroscience is proving to us that we have between 60 and 70,000 thoughts a day, of which 90% are the same thoughts as yesterday. Meaning that our brain is wired for familiarity. And if it's traumatized and you haven't processed the trauma, it's under freeze or fright or flight. Now, what you're doing is you're stuck in a high beta brainwave fueled with adrenaline, looking for danger. But now this good looking Frankie guy comes to our event and says, be authentic. And you're like, dude, I want to be authentic, but don't know how. I want to be trusting. I just don't know how. And so what's happened is that the brain's become addicted to this high beta brainwave. And as one of my teachers says, people become addicted to lives they don't even like. So you have to go
Mm.
deeper into understanding how do you relax the nervous system and how do you unlearn and unwire and unfire neurons that have been being developed under duress and under trauma. The minute you start to do some of that work, some of that trauma healing, some of that meditation, some of that, there's a bunch of tools. What starts to happen, quite literally, your brain formation starts to change, which then affects the way your personality operates, which in turn is how you unlearn.
It's beautiful. Yeah, it's funny. That's everything you just talked about is where. So the original Love Your Weird concept came from me doing these intensive experiential therapy sessions for like weeks at a time
Right,
when I was going
right,
through my divorce. That's why, like when you said the
right.
trauma thing, that's 100% in line. In fact, one of the things that we're getting honest about is the trauma. So when I talk
Yes,
about
exactly.
what's blocking us, it is the trauma, right? It's the thing that
It is,
it, and it's weird how related it is to the ego, right? So I've
yeah,
done
of course.
a lot of work around that that concept that because what happened was is that some people like you and I we've done this work, so we know
Yeah,
what 5 to 6 year old looks like. Some people can't
yeah.
remember. Some
No,
people legit can't remember, and it's because of things that happened since they were 5 or 6 that created
yeah,
that break that
yeah.
they had to build this catalyst
Yes.
or is it catalyst? No,
No, not catalyst.
callus. Callus.
Callus.
They
That's
build
right.
a callus around it, and I think that's the
Yes,
part where the
yes,
ego is on overdrive, trying to like
yes,
make sure you don't get hurt again.
yes.
And so
And
you
that,
start playing
yeah,
small, and then all of a sudden playing small is life, and then your life is small.
it's a small, and what you're doing is you're actually in pattern repetition. You are not living a new life. There's a great line that says, are you living a life based on a set of memories from your past, or are you living a life based on the vision of your future?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
most people are in memory repetition. Very
Yeah.
few people are vision focused. And so all your tools for the organizations are true. They all need to be more authentic. They need to come together and collaborate. And then that team creates magic. But
Yeah.
first, how do you become authentic? And
Yeah. I
how do you
love that.
unlearn old behaviors? You know,
I
that's a real task.
Yeah, so it's funny you mentioned that because my first unlock is I call it get honest.
Yeah.
And it's essentially about these fears that are driving
Mm,
us. At the core,
mm,
it's some sort of fear and shame.
yeah.
So it's fear and shame that have made us think, because most of what's modeled for us is the same stuff we're talking about, because rarely,
Yeah.
it's only a small percentage. Fear and shame is what forces us to put the masks on,
Yes.
because we think if we don't,
Yeah.
we're going to get hurt, or something bad's going to happen. Like you said, the fight or flight. So
Yeah.
you just live your whole life. And the crazy thing about
Inauthentically.
wearing masks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
The thing about wearing masks that's really mind blowing is when you don't even know you have one on.
But that's the point, is that the
Yeah.
psyche is so deeply entrenched inside your viewpoint. I bought my mom and dad coaching sessions for one of their anniversaries. And
Yeah.
my mom's very sweet. She's 70 years old. She said to me, "Oh, thank you so much, darling. It's awesome. But I'm quite confused. There's nothing wrong. Everything's fine. Why are you buying us
Yeah.
coaching sessions?" And I was like, "Mom, you think they're all fine. But when you start scratching the surface, you realize that a lot of the thought processes that are actually hurtful to yourself are traumatizing." And I think if we go one step further, we have masked the idea of excellence and ambition, but we've actually masked trauma inside there. Because what we've told ourselves is you must push through. You must wake up at 5. You must
Right.
always go
Right.
past your
Hustle
comfort
harder.
zone.
Yes.
But that is actually trauma being
Yeah.
reflected and projected back to yourself.
And you're
Imagine
creating
doing
more
that to a
trauma.
dog. You'd imagine doing that to, you imagine you love, love, love your dog, right? Like I do.
Yeah.
And then what? Are you going to wake your dog up every day at 5 and speak badly to your dog and push your dog? And the dog's going to be like, dude, get the fuck out of here. I don't want to be with you. But what we do with our bodies and our animals, we traumatize them based on old traumas. So for me, the big question around innovation is not the innovation itself, but how are you able to access new types of creativity, new types of awareness to start to solve problems ahead of you that you otherwise could not have seen? From your current level of awareness, you're stuck. From your current level of inauthenticity, you're stuck to only solve X, Y, and Z problems. You can't even see A, B, and C. And this is why Mercedes-Benz didn't come up with Tesla, or NASA didn't come up with SpaceX, or Google didn't come up with OpenAI. Because those executives' awareness is stuck. They're not dumb. They're super smart, but their awareness is stuck in yesterday, not tomorrow.
Look at you. Okay, so it's interesting because that 1% to 2% that we talked about that like stays at the genius level is about the same amount of people that we're talking about that have that awareness. It's probably
Yes,
a similar percentage,
sure,
and I think that
sure.
a lot of it is interconnected because if it goes back to the power of the child within,
Yes,
because digging out what's in between my adult self and my child within is the trauma. Like
yes,
what's blocking and in between those is the trauma, and getting
yes.
honest about that. So, all right, now let's talk about this then. So when you're doing this type of work, how deep do you go in your keynote experiences? And I'm sure there's, master classes and workshops, stuff like that, but like in a
So,
keynote, how do you deal with people that are at all these varying lengths of trauma, being in touch with their trauma?
well, look, the furthest I've done is I've done a 3-day workshop combination of meditation, mushrooms, and AI lectures. And
Wow,
what we
what a
did
combo.
there is like totally go into the brain and rewire with brand new data points. So meditation, mushrooms, and new data points around AI really start to infuse and curate a new way of thinking. So that's the ultimate thing I do with executives, is take them away on a psychedelic AI experience.
And what role does AI play in all that? Because I have my own kind of
Well,
philosophies on how AI can really help us with this journey, but I would like to hear yours.
sure, I think AI is such a big thing. You want to talk about it in archetypes? Do you want to talk about it as a reflection of our consciousness, or do you want to talk about it as a business tool or brand new way for humans to
Not as
engage
a
with
business
machines?
tool. The business tool is the obvious. Let's go deeper than
Sure.
business tool.
Well, if we go deeper than that, is that I think that it's a reflection point of our consciousness put into a machine.
Yes, as a
And it's
collective.
reflecting back as a collective, and it's reflecting back to us a collective intelligence that is going to elevate us in many, many different ways. And I'm really excited about it. And this is not a broad term because some places will be very negative and some places will be very positive. And I think we must always realize that there is no one future. There's multiple futures. There's always been multiple futures. This is what this earth is about. It's about duality. So you have digital dictatorships in China and Russia, and you've got blockchain democracies in other parts of the world. So you also have to be clear that it's not one fits all. There's multiple and multitude ways of engaging with it. The multiverse, not the universe, but the multiverse. This is where we're going. Multiple timelines, multiple realities, multiple accesses. And so we can go that far. But what I do with the executives when I go through that is just add in new data points of understanding where AI is, how do you apply it to your business, where do you focus your energies on it while rewiring and unlearning behaviors from the past?
I love it.
So what you're doing is you're infusing.
Golly, man, you really, I did not realize how much we were finishing each other's salads here.
Yes.
Okay. So I've been thinking a lot about AI, and I told you that I'm doing a TED Talk soon on this. And essentially there's a lot of people that are afraid of AI, right? So part of our job right now is to help people understand, like, look, let's just, because one concept that I've been thinking about lately is everybody's afraid that these machines are going to beat us or they're going to take everything. And so my first thought is, okay, let's just, for a minute, let's just play a what if game. And that is that, like, let's just assume they are going to win. Okay. What if the way to beat the machine was to let it win? Okay. And so what I mean by that is that what can this machine win at? So that's the first thing I do. What is this machine great at? Well, automation, right? And what does it automate? It automates a lot of stuff that, like, is a grind for our minds.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So I believe that the first off, everybody right now needs to be playing with it. So I think let's go back to 5 or 6. Just play with the toy. Acting like you shouldn't play with the toy is the exact kind of thinking that gets us convergent, right? So just kids want to play with toys. So play with the toy. All right. Even though you're scared, and even though our parents are scared, you still want to play with the toy. It's a natural thing to play with the toy. So the reason I bring that up is because the fear is going to keep people from actually augmenting for this new future. And and everybody wants to avoid being left behind. That's the sense that I've been getting. They don't want to be left behind. Okay, great. So how do we do that? Well, if you don't augment with it, and use the machine to do the things that we shouldn't be doing anyway. Like, I think then the challenge becomes, what am I supposed to be doing? What is my true calling as a human? And that's a question that needs to be asked.
Yes. Very good question. And I think that we have to realize that machines also beat us at the physical game.
Yeah.
We don't compete against machines anymore. We used to do all the work machines do.
Right.
And now where we are is AI is beating our intelligence. So again, we evolved our intelligence post the machines arriving. And now we need to evolve our emotional intelligence as our logical intelligence starts getting disrupted.
Because that's right. I love that. So that's really how you've been really cleaning up the lines then, is logical versus emotional intelligence.
It's an emotional currency that we're moving towards. Because let me ask you this question. Has 2 PhDs and an MBA made you happy as a person? And the answer is no. And has your 3 BMWs and 2 Prozac made you happy? No. And has your addiction to porn and 4 MBAs and your MD position as a CEO of a company made you happy? No. So you start to realize that this logical machine that we've been told we should become has actually betrayed us in many ways. And many people feel fatigued and exhausted, not because of work or the constant grind, but it's actually because of betrayal. Betrayal of a system that actually doesn't feed us exactly what we need. The logical mind is not what we should be after. We should be after more of an emotional, creative, peaceful process.
Yeah.
And so that's
who we were from the beginning.
Yeah. It's been drummed out of us. And this is the system that has been created for us to conform into. And I even think I'll go as far as saying some religions are systems that have been forced for us to conform to.
Of course. Oh, are you kidding?
Yes.
That religion's a powerful machine.
Powerful machine, just like corporations and just like societal cultural norms. And so I do think that at the space where we're just seeing the breakdown of old stories that were folk tales that we've kind of been following without even thinking about it. Like monogamy, marriage, I don't know, whatever. You just name it. It's things that we just take for granted and think, no, this is the normal way. And anybody who doesn't do it like this is weird. And that is all breaking down. Everything from,
Well, I just wanted to throw this out there. First of all, this is all like just pure gold. So thank you.
Pleasure.
I was talking with my wife yesterday about The Village. Remember the movie The Village?
Yes.
And how they basically, they felt like the reason why people have done this is like for years is not because they are trying to do anything bad or they want to be simple or anything like that. They truly believe that this is the only way to protect their family or to protect their loved ones. So these folk tales are this, sometimes this closet right outside the village with the costumes in it.
Yes.
But it's okay, even though it's very inauthentic and there's this dirty little secret because it's for the greater good of my people.
Yes.
And that's the hardest part that is entrenched in all of it.
Yes.
And so so I've been thinking about that just this week. Like, what do we have in our shed, our village shed, that we even have bought into? What's in the village shed?
The only way to figure that out is to do some sort of altered state healing process. Because you have to take yourself out of the five senses and alter your state to a different timeline to be able to look back onto your life in an objective way. Ayahuasca does this. Magic mushrooms does this. San Pedro does this. These plants that I've been engaging with shamanic plants for the last 15 years. And in the ceremonies, something very, very important happens that we never get the opportunity to do is to look at your life objectively rather than being inside the matrix, stepping out of the matrix and looking at it with a lens of wisdom, love, and forgiveness. And this is what all the plant ceremonies do. That's all they're actually doing. And when you go through that process, it's observing yourself and realizing that many, many, many of your thought processes are based on false memories that you've decided to hold on to develop your identity. And without those false memories, even though they are painful, who would you be without them? And that's the hardest thing for us to do, is for us to really become clear that many aspects of our personality are false stories. They're just false. They're not true. You can rewire them and change your memories.
That's amazing. So for people do you feel like the only way to get there is through plant? Is there another way to get there other than the plant medicine?
Breath work, anything that alters your state takes you out of being Frankie Russo. So when you're Frankie Russo, you have a personality. Your personality puts you somewhere in you're somebody somewhere in some time. You're anchored into a time-space reality based on your personality and stories. You have to become nobody, nowhere, no time for a period of time. And how do you do that? You alter your state.
I have a friend that would love you so much. She's a naturopathic doctor, and she is huge on duality and this idea of how do you get to that place where you're no one. Yeah.
No one. Yes.
And it's wild. And right before no one is your everyone.
Well, no. Well, for my practice is you somebody somewhere in some time. No, wait. You somebody somewhere in some time. Then you become nobody, nowhere in no time. And then you become everything, everywhere, in all time.
Okay. That's what it is. So nowhere.
Yeah.
So everywhere.
Then everywhere.
Okay. Got
it. Then you become God, right? Then you connect to the all knowing, the all wise, the whole machine. Like, you're right. So what you have to do is find out how do you alter your state to step aside from your personality, to look back at your personality, to understand objectively the stories that aren't making sense, the history that you have created that doesn't necessarily have to be there. And when I found out I could change my memories, I was bamboozled by it. And I have changed many of my memories. And I only have fond memories of my father when it wasn't all fond. And after 20 years of not speaking to him, now I speak to him.
Yeah, and the memories that you changed about your father, they're still true. You changed the ones that are in the forefront. Is that basically what it is?
No, it's understanding empathetically who he was and how well he tried. He was stumped by his level of software, his level of education. He'd have no internet. He didn't understand he was being triggered and beating us. And seeing him empathetically, it's like, he was also a little bit fucked up.
Right.
But I was expecting him to be perfect.
And that journey, what I always talk about with people when we're doing this work is this idea of even if all I can start with for someone like that is pity,
Yeah,
pity can then grow
yeah,
into
yeah,
compassion.
yeah.
But it's interesting you said that because you said you changed your memories.
Yes.
Is it that you reframed them, or is it different memories?
Well, understand that when you're not angry, traumatized, and blaming your dad or whoever it is from your past, you only get to choose different stories that you remember. But when you're angry and bitter and angry, you're choosing to hold on to certain memories that you have actually dramatized. You've taken
Mm-hmm.
those memories and you have dramatized them to give you even more energy to
Permission.
stay angry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
A license.
a license. And so when you decide that he's actually a human being who was trying his best, he wasn't being malicious, or if he was, it was because of X, Y, and Z, all of a sudden your vision of him changes, your lens of him changes, and the memories you choose to remember change.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
it's just about unlearning. This is actually just unlearning old stories that you've held on to.
Oh,
They
I
don't need to
love
be there.
that. Yeah, it's so true. My wife has been doing a lot of work on this
Yeah.
with the doctor that I'm talking about, and
Yes.
so I've been in AA for a long time, and
Right.
sober and all that fun stuff, and it's been about 16 years. So it's kind of interesting
Yeah.
for me because I've gotten there a different way to the
Got
same
it.
reality that you're talking about, and
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
fantasize about the plant based stuff because obviously I'm a drug addict. And I always laugh
But
because
that's
I
not a
feel like
drug, eh, Frankie? That's not a drug. In
talk to me
fact,
about that. Talk to me more about
yeah,
that.
it's not a drug. Remember that drug use is to escape broken insides. That's what a
Right?
drug is. A drug is how do I get away from this
Yes.
miserable life the stories that I've created for myself, right?
Hmm.
What plant medicine does is exactly the opposite of escaping. In fact, plant medicine takes you deeper into your psyche, makes you present with your objective personality, and gets you to connect with your oversoul, your genius, your God, whatever it may be. So it's in fact the exact opposite, and people go there and get off drugs.
Yeah.
So it's not a
Well, I've heard
drug.
a lot about that. Yeah, I've heard a lot
Yeah, it's
about
not a
that, which is
drug.
interesting. Um, yeah.
It's a
So
plant medicine. Its wisdom is way beyond our understanding of wisdom. Your access to love for yourself is increased tenfold. And there's no downer because you're not doing something that's extracting from your future. It's infusing you with more of yourself.
wow.
It's a very different process to drugs. I mean, drugs are you know what? I actually think it's rude to call them drugs because the idea of it should never be mixed up. We being in a nightclub doing cocaine and ecstasy and acid and having and losing ourselves, that's
Uh-huh.
drugs.
Yeah.
Going into a ceremony that's you've fasted for, or you've dieted for, you've washed yourself for, you've intended for, you've written goals for. You're going in there to connect. You're not
Yeah.
escaping shit.
That's
Nothing.
beautiful. Yeah, it's interesting that you frame it that way because I mean, if you think about, I always think about antibiotics versus painkillers, right? So if
Right.
you think about it in that, regardless of if, the role that antibiotics are supposed to play versus a
Yeah.
painkiller just numbs it, whereas the
Yeah.
antibiotic is designed to heal the
Right.
bacteria or the germs or
Right.
whatever. That's a very different thing, even though both are drugs, technically, right?
Yes.
Is that
Yes.
kind of
Yes.
the same
Exactly.
frame that you're in on this?
Yeah. I mean, also let's remember these plants come from God, dude. Cocaine
Yeah.
doesn't come from God, bro. It's been through a flippin' process. Neither does MDMA. These are grow in the earth. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not exactly like they're here to try and get you hooked. In
It's
fact,
not the
you
same as
can't
like
get hooked to
heroin
ayahuasca.
or
No,
ice.
but you can't even get to ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is so disgusting to put into your mouth. It's the last thing that you want to be tasting ever. But the journey she takes you on, the way she loves you, the way she engages with you and shows you so softly and so lovingly your redesign and recalibration of your memories. I mean, it is just I mean, look, I've done 70 ayahuascas. It was a profound, life-changing
Wow.
experience for me. I don't think I would have ever been here without it.
Well, it's clear that you have a deep level of clarity, and it's interesting this idea of the objective look. In the
Mm,
work that I do with the guys that I help, a lot of it is about really uncovering from within the fears, from within the resentments that we
mm,
have, and the
mm,
pain that was inflicted. Like really looking
mm,
at that from a standpoint of like, all right, this is what Dad did.
mm.
It affected all this shit. but in the end, kind of what's my part in that
Mm,
today? Like, what's my part
mm,
in that today? Like, is
mm,
it, and when you can start to clarify that, it gives you
mm.
a new way forward where,
Can I?
one
Yeah.
of the interesting thing about it is that you talked about like this, like an objective look. I think that that's
Mm,
the interesting role of the healer or the person that's
mm.
helping us, because they can help us see that, especially if it's somebody who has no
Yes.
skin in the game. Like, one of the most
Yes.
profound components is that if our family can't do this for us,
No.
your friend can't.
No.
But if it's
No.
somebody that's objective and has no skin in the game
Yeah.
and is there just because they want to help you get unlocked, it creates a space that's just beautiful.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with you. But I just want to remind you of an Einstein quote from 120 years ago.
Yep.
And what he said was, the medicine of the future is the medicine of frequency. So let me break that down for you.
Yeah, do it.
Because what we do often is we logically forgive somebody, but emotionally we can't because we're stuck in the same
Mm.
frequency. And what one of my teachers says is, don't try and forgive anybody through your brain. Just change your frequency and that person will fall off you. You won't even think of them. So what is your frequency? Your frequency is your electrical charge and your electrical current that creates your personality and your awareness. And so your
Mm.
frequency is your awareness, and your awareness is your personality, and your personality is made up of how you think, act, and feel. And if you can understand how to change the way you think, you'll change the way you act and the way you feel, which means that in order for you to forgive anybody, you should never even try and forgive them. What you should do is just look at changing your awareness. And the next time you think about it or look at them, you want a different frequency, which means that that person doesn't bother you in any way that they used to. And a great way to figure out whether you have evolved or changed is think about somebody from 10 years ago that you didn't like. And if you still don't like them, you haven't evolved
Yeah.
because your frequency's stuck.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I did with my dad is I didn't even want to forgive my dad. I was quite happy for 20 years not to speak to him. It was a big part of my identity. I'd become independent and successful without him. And even with him in my picture, I'd still become more successful than him. It was a big story of mine. And then I
Yeah.
started microdosing, and then I started doing 2 hours of meditation a day. And you know what? I'm friends with my dad, and it happened so magically and so haphazardly. Nothing ever made me think I'm going to phone my dad and fix this relationship. But it just happened. Why? Because I softened towards him,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd never softened. And I didn't try and soften. I just elevated my consciousness. And in that
Yeah.
state and that frequency, all of a sudden, he has no issue with me. I have no issue with
Mm-hmm.
him.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. No, I get it. And it's interesting, different people, whether it be meditation or even prayer, that some people will
Right.
do. Like one of the hacks that they taught us that usually works pretty handy is this idea that you're essentially sending prayer, you're sending positive energy towards the
Mm.
person that you have a resentment
Yes.
towards. And
Yes. Ah,
basically
nice.
asking that the universe or God or whatever gives them whatever it is that you want. And a
Ah,
lot of times,
yes.
yeah, and a lot of times, literally within 2 weeks, it's funny you said
Yeah.
2 weeks, because it actually says within 2 weeks, one of two
Yeah.
things will happen. You either are feeling different about it or you've stopped doing it because that's how much it just no longer is even a thing.
Yeah.
And some
That's
people, it
it.
takes a little bit longer, but that's the same kind of concept, you know?
The same concept. And this is that. Look what we're talking about. We're talking about AI in the future, and we're going back to emotions because
Mm-hmm.
if your emotions aren't in the right place, AI is scary. And if your emotions aren't in the right place, you can't trust the uncertain future. So you're wanting people to engage with AI, but they're coming with trauma and high beta brainwaves. Everything is dangerous to them, let alone AI that might replace them at work. This is like the biggest danger. So everything is anxious and frustrating to them, let alone AI. So you don't have to teach AI to people that are stressed and frustrated. Actually, I'm going to make them worse. Just get them to be calmer and more peace, and then slowly bring the AI data points in when they're in a state of calm and clarity
And open-minded is one of the things that
and
we talk about.
open-mindedness. Yeah, yeah,
But you
exactly.
can't get to that in that triggered,
You
scared,
can't.
afraid
And
state.
and most of the population in the world are triggered. I mean, America in
Mm-hmm.
itself, just from the politics, is triggered, let alone from the economy and let alone from everything. And the world at large is triggered. I mean, look at all the wars happening, all the people fighting, all the shit going on. You know, I don't think a war's ever been created by somebody who wasn't triggered. Every war in
Oh
the
yeah,
world is
no,
because of somebody triggered.
Well, and
Everybody.
with yeah, every single war was triggered by someone's unresolved trauma with their
Yeah,
childhood. Yes, no
yeah,
doubt about it. No doubt
every
about it.
single. And so here we are in a world where everybody has a voice, everybody has X, everybody has TikTok, and now guess what? Everybody's spewing trauma. Now the war in Palestine gives you another opportunity to find yourself to become a victim of it and to lash out through a trauma action, trauma reaction. You know, it's a
Right.
horrific place
In
of
the name of
emotional
some weird
turmoil.
version of freedom. Yeah.
Yeah,
No, I'm with you, man. Well, listen, this
yeah.
is awesome. We could do this for days, and I hope we'll get to. I'm actually looking forward to actually be in your side of the world later this year.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes,
I'm
yes.
still working on some of the dates, but somewhere in this, we're gonna
Great.
get to see you live, and
I
who
look
knows?
forward to it.
Maybe one day there'll
Yeah.
be some mushrooms or something involved. But
I
this has
hope
been
so.
cool, right? Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So what's the best way to
Wonderful,
find
man.
you? Is it just
John
Sonne,
Sanei. Yeah,
johnsonne.com?
Instagram, LinkedIn,
Yeah.
johnsonei.com.
You
Insta,
can't
that's,
miss.
you know,
He's the cool
you can't
guy that
miss it.
always has the perfect filters with the really cool glasses on. If that's the guy you're
Okay,
looking
thank
for.
you.
No, I
Thank you.
love your
Thank you,
stuff.
Frankie.
This has been awesome. Your perspective, your level of consciousness, it is inspiring, and
Thank you.
I absolutely am so glad I get to share this little tidbit with the world on the podcast.
Thank you.
So thank you so
Thank
much
you,
for being
Frankie.
on.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, brother. Great to
It's
see you.
beautiful. And for everybody listening, thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, this has been the School of Weird podcast.